Hello. So welcome in. Uh, Here's another cup of tea. I'm having fun with this. I know nobody's watching, but I'm having fun because I get to get my thoughts out there. I kind of wanted to reflect on a little bit on my time in England, and I learned a few things about life in general, or about England, about myself, about my own country, the way people view my country, the way I view my country. So my wife and I lived in England for 2 years. We just got back a couple months ago, and we moved there just before the coronavirus. We stuck out most of the coronavirus. Didn't work out with her job. I didn't find anything other than a part-time job at a supermarket. Um, and it turns out that it was probably for the best that we moved back here. My wife found a better job. My mom's been sick lately, so I've been able to go down and visit. Um, and so, but I don't regret the experience. I just regret coronavirus, as I think most people have done. But one of the things so I worked at a supermarket. I actually started off doing selling travel money. So basically, if you were going to America, I'd sell you dollars. If you're going to Europe, I'd sell you euros or whatever the other currencies that you wanted. We would sell them to you. And obviously, when the coronavirus hit, travel was pretty much off the table, except for emergencies, and nobody was going anywhere. So we ended up going out into the on the shop floor, and at first they started sticking me in different places. I was in like the fresh section. I stocked shelves and stuff like that, and then eventually they put me on a till, and I ended up mostly staying by the tills. Occasionally, I would do other things as needed, but it's and being on the till, I guess you have more interaction with customers than you would anywhere else. Um, and one thing that I noticed is that when your interaction there, so if you're on the till, not doing like self checkout or anything like that, um, you would essentially have to sit there and talk to them while you're scanning their items. And in England, they bag their own groceries. You know, and we had a lot of people who worked at the till who would moan about their job. I said, you probably get doing half the work that somebody in America would have to do, and you're complaining about it. Um, but inevitably, because it was happening, like I was there and it was 2020, to begin with, I it was very interesting because the people would ask me, "Oh, how do you find it?" Like, well, there's not really much to do. This is pretty much my activity for the week is coming to work. Everything else is just being at home, not doing very much, going for the occasional walk when it's not raining, but and then people felt like the liberty to ask me about the election. And I just really felt like not offended, but really put upon because I'm at work. And as a worker, you represent your company. I know that you represent your country, but you also represent your company. And the supermarket would probably not be very interested in me discussing politics, especially in an election that was very, really controversial. And I basically I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it at all. I didn't want to talk about it with people in an environment that was, if you want to discuss this, it's going to take longer than 2 minutes. And then I shouldn't be on the clock. And then I not really want to do this, So I just felt, just the number of people who just felt free to say, oh, well, oh, well, Americans are racist. Like, I'm right here. I could say a lot of things I can make really sweeping generalizations about the English, but I'm not gonna, It's totally amazing. I don't know where people get the nerve. So, like this kind of underlies a sort of theme that I've had for pretty much my whole working career is a very common theme, but a lot of people, it's not common enough, is that you shouldn't be talking about politics or religion at work. You should be doing work. And if you need to talk about things as sort of just to break up the day, talk about sports or talk about music or talk about things that people aren't as invested in. I know people are invested in sport, but you can kind of get away with the banter. You can't really do that in politics. Political discussions are rarely banter the way, if you're like, for example, I worked in one office. It was in Central Jersey, which is sort of halfway between New York City and halfway between Philadelphia. And half the office were either from the New York teams, and the other half were from Philadelphia or the Philadelphia area, and they would talk about the Philadelphia teams. And then there would be people from other parts of the country, from, I don't know, Chicago or California, and they would have their sports teams. But the thing is, like, you can take the banter because that's just kind of in the nature of things. And we're fooling ourselves when we think, well, politics is much the same. How can you say, like, oh, I actually heard like good nature arguments about, oh, well, Giants fans are all baby eaters. And, which if you'd said that about Democrats or Republicans, you'd probably be going for a visit to the HR office. But I find it totally amazing how people feel free to do this stuff at work, to do it in open society. To have political discussions at the supermarket is very bizarre. It's just not an appropriate place to do that. It's not illegal, but it's just, what do you hope to solve by this conversation? And it just, it wasn't always like that, but there was this one fella, I can remember him. He was this Irish fella who'd come in and just start talking politics. I was like, dude, honestly, I'd rather talk about stocking shelves and do you know how to work a baler? A baler is like where they take cardboard boxes and make it into almost like a hay bale, but you do it with cardboard boxes. That's more interesting than politics at work, to be honest with you. And I didn't really want to say anything like to rebuff him like swiftly, but I kind of stood my ground. I felt really proud of myself for doing that, not caving, not doing what he wanted to do, yet not being rude. You kind of have to be careful because you're at work, but also you project an image. You're a representative of your country. So if you're an American in a foreign country, like it or not, their experience with Americans might be limited to what they see on TV, which is obviously, it's nonsense. You wouldn't think about British people from what you see on Doctor Who or what's another show that made it over here? Are You Being Served from back in the 70s? That's not a fair representation, or, Coronation Street is not a good example of what people are like in England. And it's just I did feel this kind of, this pressure, and I felt it was a good pressure because it kind of encourages you to be the best person you can be, not just for yourself, but for your countrymen. And I worked with there was another American there who didn't really give us all a good name, to be honest with you. He was very strange. He was very needy. And one thing I've learned in my short time on Earth and working in any work environment is the boss does not want to deal with your crap. Whatever problems you've got going on at home, or with your health, or all this shit that's going on in your head, the boss does not want to deal with that. He's got enough problems of his own that are just going to show up in the supermarket that day, let alone your crazy ass. So I've learned very quickly, if you want to get on your boss's good side, just never make problems for him. Make problems go away for him, and he will love you. That's basically my advice to anybody: is make problems go away. Don't create them. And the thing is that I think, at least the people who work there, they saw the contrast between us. We might have been the only Americans that they knew decently, and I think most people who had been around both of us saw the stark contrast between us, and it was kind of jarring, because I tend to be a quiet person, especially in sort of that setting where you don't have to talk if you don't need to. You don't have to talk if I'm not really bothered by keeping quiet, he says on a 20-minute video, but this is more therapy and hanging out and talking and getting things off my chest, and I'm doing it on my own time, and I'm not saying anything controversial or offensive, or even if I were, it's just not. This is the right area to be doing this, not at work, not making other people's lives miserable at work. And so I really feel if you're in a small minority, whether it's fair or not, you do represent the image that the rest of you have. So as an American, obviously there wasn't a choice of mine, and it wasn't a choice of his, but how we behave is the choice. And like it or not, whether it's fair or not, when people in that environment think of Americans, they're probably going to think of us. And then they're going to extrapolate that onto a country of over 300 million people. And you do feel a bit of responsibility to give the rest of your country a good name. And I don't think that you should bend over backwards to make excuses for things going on in your country or your country's history. But just say, because you could say, one of them years from now will say, I worked with an American, he was all right. That's the best you can hope for. You don't want them to think of the other guy and to say, I worked as an American, he was a fucking nut job. See, the thing is, it's really easy to give somebody a good impression. And that's the thing is so when we were in England, I went out of my way to learn about the country, not just Cockney rhyming slang or anything like that. I went, and my wife and I, when things started opening up, at least especially outdoor stuff, my wife and I got a membership to the National Trust, which is sort of they buy land, like stately homes, these big manors where Lord so and so lived about 300 years ago, and you can go around and look at it, and some of them are really nice, some of them are horrible. And we also got one to the English Heritage, which I actually thought the English Heritage is very similar. I think is largely castles and stuff, but also coastlines and stuff. I thought English Heritage was a little bit better, but I went out and we went everywhere. We were in Buckinghamshire, and interestingly enough, the English Heritage, there was nothing in Buckinghamshire. They had nothing. It was one of the few counties in England that they didn't have anything in. Apparently there's nothing there. I mean, most of the stuff is just over the border. You can go down to Windsor, which is just down in Berkshire. Maybe it was only 20 minutes, half an hour from where we lived. We went there a couple of times. It was, Windsor's a pretty nice town. It's very touristy. Obviously, during the coronavirus, is the best time. If you're in England or any country that's very heavily touristy, the best thing to do is go live there during a pandemic. Because we went the first week that they reopened Stonehenge. We went there. and because that was something we wanted to do. And it's not as impressive physically. I mean, you look at these giant stones and they weigh like tens of thousands of pounds. You think, well, okay, yeah. And how did they build them? You know, you sit there and just start thinking about this, and they don't really know how this happened, where these stones came from. They maybe said they came from Wales. Who knows? That's a long way to bring them all down there. It's about 100 miles. You start thinking about it. The cool thing is, like, you actually been to a place where just about everybody on the planet knows where this is. It's not some kind of obscure site. This is one of the most famous places on Earth. And you're there. And nobody else is there. I mean, there were some people, but the thing is, it was part of the English heritage. So if you got him, we bought the membership just for that. And then I think it was maybe 20 or 30 pounds. You could go into the circle. It used to be maybe 30, 40 years ago. You could just walk around wherever the hell you wanted to. But they kind of roped it off where you have to stand back maybe 20 or 30 feet from it. But if you pay a little extra, you can go either early in the morning before the tours started happening, or you can go in the afternoon or late, like early evening when the tours end. And you can walk around and somebody will kind of give you a little lecture about what they think was going on there. It was amazing. And the guy who ran it, he said, like, you know, before this whole thing started happening, you would have had to book this after hours visit because there were only like 30, 40 people. You would have had to book it 8-9 months in advance. That's insane. So you would basically have to plan your whole trip out there. And it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's in Wiltshire, which is basically just farmland. So I thought, you know, like we were really lucky with the pandemic in the sense that we got to go places like the Tower of London was empty. You know, I'd been there before, but a lot of these castles, like Oxford was a ghost town. It was really cool. It was a little creepy, you know, a little sad that some of these businesses are going to suffer because of this, but I did really well in the traveling department, at least in England. And we went up to Hadrian's Wall, which is way up north, near a little bit south of the Scottish border. And it was like the first nice weekend. This was just last year, 2021. And we went up to Yorkshire, which is south of where that is. We spent a few days there. We went up to Hadrian's Wall. I'm a Roman history nut. I love that. I've got a ton of books over there about Roman history. I love Greek stuff. Obviously, the Greeks didn't make it up there, but the Romans were there for about 400 years. And they built that wall, and most of it's still there, and it's really cool. You know, you can see, old temples, old fortresses and stuff. And there weren't that many people there. It was really cool. So, you know, like, and then I would talk to people at work, and I say, they would ask me, well, what did you do this last week? And I was like, we went up to Yorkshire, and then we went up to Hadrian's Wall. I've never been up north. Like, you've never been to Hadrian's Wall, because it is out in the countryside. I mean, it goes clear across from the North Sea over to the Irish Sea. It's about 70, 80 miles long. I could see that you wouldn't go up there. Okay, I can understand that. But never having left your region of the country is very strange to me. And they complain about, oh, it's an hour away. I think, like, a lot of people commute an hour away here in America. That's nothing. Like, you guys are wimps when it comes to travel. Like, just getting over from America to England is an 8-9 hour trip. You add in all the time of getting to the airport, going through all the security, having to wait around for the airplane to be ready, board the airplane. That's another half an hour. Get over there. They park the plane when you land. That takes another half an hour. Getting all your stuff, getting out of there, getting to the place wherever you're going to go. I mean, you're in for like 14, 15 hours, even though the flight is like 7 or 8, depending on which direction you go. They don't get it. They don't get it. Going places, and we went everywhere, and it really was amazing because people would talk to me about this. I was like, yeah, we went up there. And then it's like, I've never been there. There was this place called Cliveden, only about 5-10 miles from where I lived. And people were like, I've never been there. I was like, well, do you have English hair? Or that Cliveden's National Trust. I said, you could just go down there, take the dog for a walk. There's huge grounds everywhere. There's just woods and stuff. You can walk around in there. Oh, I've never done that before. It's amazing how many people they don't travel. They have, these people have seen more of places like Spain or Italy or Greece than they have of their own country. And I think one of the things that a lot of people realized in this whole coronavirus thing in England is how rich their country is in cultural stuff. And then people like us would leave our country just to go see old piles of rocks from, an old beat up castle that just didn't survive the years. He's like, it's sort of like a tower there, well, shoot, I'll go drive an hour to go look at a pile of rocks. And they just don't get that. They don't understand how interesting their country is. If you're inclined towards that stuff, you're like a pig in shit in England. You like old castles, old cathedrals. Salisbury Cathedral, York Minster. These are amazing places. York Minster was incredible, and you just go there and you just look at all the architecture, and you think, we have nothing like this in America, and we would build something up and 20 years later it's gone. And so we just have no sense of permanence in America. Maybe some of the older towns, like here in Philadelphia is one of the older towns, Boston, but a lot of places they're just ugly, because why bother designing it if you're just gonna knock it down 3 or 4 years later. So anyway, that's about all I got for you today. Thanks for watching if you have made it this far. And I'll see you in the next video. See ya.